All right, guys, we have got ourselves another preview here, this time for the Arizona Cardinals. Um, we're going to do our regular stuff, go through our roster, schedule, any bets we may have, stuff that happened last year, all that fun stuff that we normally go through. And yeah, hopefully we get to the end and we have a better thought, better look at what the Arizona Cardinals are going into next season. But let's start with last year. Um, funky last year. They win their first two games and then finish the season with a total record of 3-14, so winning one out of their final 15, which obviously is not very good. But a lot of injuries, a lot of different weird things that kind of happened along the way that put Arizona in this position. 5 games in, Kyler Murray gets hurt, and we have 12 games of Jacoby Brissett, who will be the starter this year. So you get backup play right off rip, pretty much. And then, again, Kyler Murray, the one hurt, and his era over in Arizona is done. The 2019 first overall pick is now in Minnesota, and the Arizona Cardinals are in full reset mode. They remove head coach Gannon. He is gone. Mike LaFleur comes in to replace him, former Rams offensive coordinator. First time calling plays, it's going to be most likely. They retain the defensive coordinator, Nick Rallis, and it's an interesting little twist in there. Again, new coaches are not new, but keeping coordinators is kind of a thing that doesn't happen a whole ton. And I kind of like Gannon as a coordinator, a defensive coordinator, but and that may just be trying to keep his tree around with Nick Rallis, who was there last year and working under him. So I don't hate it or anything. It's just unique. And they'll look to improve on last year. Again, last year, bottom third in offensive EPA and defensive EPA for the most part. NFC worst minus 133 point differential. So not good there. And then an awkward year for a couple of their mainstays, guys you kind of want to be moving forward with. Marvin Harrison Jr., who had a awkward year and will hope to have a bounce back this year and stuff like that. So not a whole lot went the Cardinals' way, but it's a full reset here, and they'll hope to kind of kickstart that with some growth this year, some positive stuff from the coaching, some positive stuff from some of their younger players. And, we'll see where this Cardinal team ends up. Last year, again, rush offense 24th, pass offense 22nd, total offense 23rd, and this is per play before we said bottom three in total EPA. Again, that's all added up. Per play, 23rd in offensive EPA, and then pass defense 25th, rush defense 27th, and total defense 26th in EPA. So not good. Again, bottom end in regular EPA added up, and then per play, bottom end again, which isn't good. And a lot of decent players go out the door here. Again, Kyler Murray is gone, full reset there at quarterback. Jalen Thompson, who was one of the better players. The next three players we're going to name were the three best rated players I had last year on the defense. Jalen Thompson, Calais Campbell, Dalvin Tomlinson, all out the door. Davis Gaither out the door. Greg Dortch, who I kind of like, out the door. Evan Brown, Channing Tindall, Darren Hall, Jonah Williams, who didn't play particularly well, all out the door. And again, that was a bad defense last year. And again, to me, the top three players performing on that defense last year out the door. So a lot of talent gone of the 11 starters. And again, we'll get to it, but it's going to be a tough year for the Cardinals, most likely. We're looking for any positives we can find, young players, stuff like that. So we'll see what that looks like going on in. But again, talent out the door. Put a couple decent players in. Isaac Sayumalu is a good player at guard. Bought over from Pittsburgh. Tyler Algier is a solid backup running back there. Gardner Minshew brought in Roy Lopez to start on the interior defensive line. Kendrick Bourne is a decent addition. Andrew Wingard, Elijah Wilkinson at guard, Andrew Billings, and Devin Duvernay, more of a special teams return guy, but a couple decent players bought in there. And then in the draft, Jeremiah Love gets bought in, running back, third overall pick. Chase Besantis at guard. Carson Beck, who we'll talk about in a minute. Caleb Proctor on the interior defensive line. Reggie Virgil at wide receiver. Carson Sherrar at linebacker. And Jaden Williams at tackle. So they do get 7 picks in. You get to bring in a couple decent players. Again, these are the players we're gonna have. I'm not gonna focus on a ton, but the Cardinals are gonna focus on a bunch. Again, I'm not a scout, so I can't like walk you through some of these rookies. But in terms of what you want to develop going into it, it's the younger players this year. You kind of want them to just be in a decent spot. But let's jump into the roster. We'll start at quarterback like we always do. Jacoby Brissett will be the starting quarterback this year. They had their weird contract standoff, but he was pretty solid in relief for Kyler Murray last year. I'm not going to talk. I'm going to mention it multiple times, but this is one of them. And again, I'm only going to mention it twice. But it needs to be mentioned here. I'm not exactly sure where the Cardinals, what the whole idea was with giving Brissett a raise and having that whole situation was really interesting to me. I was really surprised Brissett did it, number one. And number two, I was really, or asked for a raise, number one. And number two, I was really surprised the Cardinals kind of gave it to him considering their position. But that weird contract standoff aside, again, solid for Kyler Murray last year. As a backup, again, in terms of just what he is as a player, 24th in success rate's pretty good for a backup. They had some offensive issues last year. Again, offensive line, some of the skill stuff was a little bit funky. So he did pretty well last year considering PFF's 23rd rated quarterback last year. This is kind of who he is. There's no real ceiling here outside of this, but in terms of giving you a decent floor for a backup, Jacoby Brissett is pretty high up there. Again, there aren't a ton of backups better than he is, and he's a decent quarterback that you kind of want in a situation like this when you're probably not going to be very good and you're kind of just looking for a bridge. You know, you can't really go wrong with Jacoby Brissett. The money's a little bit funky, though. But he's been decent now for 4 or 5 years in the games he's been playing. So, a solid player. Again, the ceiling, this is probably it in terms of his ceiling, but the bridge stuff is good for him. 23 touchdowns to 8 interceptions last year. A couple big time throws in there as well. If you're getting this kind of play that you got last year with him this year, that's pretty good. So again, there's not a ton here to look at in terms of what it looks like at quarterback, but you're kind of just looking for that bridge. Again, just looking for a guy who can come in, and we'll talk about it, and probably play like 10 to 12 games. You probably don't even need him to play all year. I imagine if this team's bad enough, it'll move on to the back end of the rest of the quarterback room, which we'll talk about in a minute. But you can't really go wrong with the situation you're in and the quarterback you've chosen. Gardner Minshew's the backup here, who I expect to get a couple of games this year. Okay, he's kind of fallen off quite a bit from back when everybody, thought highly of Gardner Minshew. He's not really that player anymore. Definitely the second best quarterback on this roster. So I imagine this scenario goes a little bit like Brissett plays 10 to 12 games. They're not playing particularly well as expected. And you kind of want to see what else you have. Minshew may come in for a game or two. And then Carson Beck, the rookie, who's had he had a really great preseason game and the Hall of Fame game. And obviously that's not real NFL snaps. But I imagine he gets the back end of this campaign, just kind of seeing what you've got. Because you spend a 3rd round pick on him, you have to at least check what you have before you go into next year. So I imagine Beck is going to get some time later on in the season. And then we get like a Brissett, maybe some Minshew in there, but I'm pretty confident we get like 5 or 6 games out of Carson Beck. Should the team be bad, which is our expectation going in, and Keaton Slovis in behind. But again, Beck, interesting prospect. Looked good for a long periods at Georgia. Had that bad last year. Went to Miami and was pretty solid again. He was pretty money in that preseason game the other day. So there's a little bit of talent there. And again, you draft him in the third round. So we'll see what that looks like. But I imagine he gets some snaps later on down the line. As for the skill position group, this is an interesting group we're going to get into here. At wide receiver, you get Marvin Harrison Jr., who had a bad year last year and hasn't really took off just yet. I'm of the impression that he has a bounce back year. Now, some of his stuff is, in terms of separating, is a little bit, you'd like it to be better. The drop stuff is obviously a concern, but in terms of players like at this camp, he's I'm pretty comfortable saying he's the best wide receiver on this team. I'm not sure. Well, Michael Wilson I like, but I'm not so sure if he has a lot of the talent that or Marvin Harrison has. So my expectation is that Marvin Harrison gets a good chunk of like the most targets at wide receiver this year, jump balls, things like that. But I think he gets open the most as well. So I think Marvin Harrison Jr. has a bounce back year. If he doesn't, and he's not getting open, and like the drops are still there, then you kind of worry for what his career might end up looking like total, particularly as you know, as the prospect he was coming out. So we'll see. Michael Wilson again, I just don't think he's as good as Marvin Harrison in terms of the wide receiver stuff, the route running and things, but I do like him. I think he's a solid two. Kendrick Bourne's on this team as well, another solid player, nothing spectacular but solid. Reggie Virgil, you bring in who's a rookie, hoping to get himself a couple snaps here and there. I imagine, again, at some stage, we'll be featuring a decent amount of these rookies just to see what they look like. Devin Duvernay in there, again, more of a return guy, but can play wide receiver. Xavier Weaver, Simi Fehoko, and then we get further down here, Jalen Brooks, Tawan Palmer. Not exactly what we're hoping to see on the field as the year goes on, but I think it could be a decent room. Again, like the ceiling, like if Marvin Harrison really clicks, like the ceiling isn't super, super high in terms of the room itself, but at the start, it's not a good room, and I think it can work its way up as the year goes on. And again, I personally like the idea, or at least think of the idea, as Marvin Harrison kind of bouncing back and having a better year and going forward from there. So we'll see. Just give me, there we go. Miswrote that one. Running back room. And here is the second part we're talking about where I don't understand some things. Jeremiah Love, the rookie, comes in. Jeremiah Love is probably going to be a really, really good football player. This is the dumbest pick that could have come out of that draft, period. And it felt like when the rumors were there for them and for Tennessee, frankly, when the rumors were there for Tennessee and Arizona to take it, like, that was it. You could pencil this in as the dumbest pick in the draft. It doesn't matter who took him. Arizona took him. The age curve on running backs is so aggressive for like 99% of these dudes that taking using the third overall pick on a running back when you're years away from competing is silly. Now, again, I'm not knocking Jeremiah Love's talent. I think Jeremiah Love is going to be a really good running back. I have no doubt about that. But this is, for the most probably probably third after those two, after Bijan and Gibbs the other day. But like, what are the chances that he's in his second contract, at his second contract? What are the chances, like, year four, that you're like competing? Like, this is a complete and utter luxury pick for a team with zero luxury. And we can go through the rest of the lineup as we go, and we're going to, but it needs to be put on to a player who's going to be impactful at a position of importance. And running back is just not that. Um, that being said, in terms of this year, after the rant's done, we're done ranting about how this team gets built. We're now fully on what the team looks like. Again, Jeremiah Love is a really good player. I thought he looked really good in college. I think he's going to be a good player. This running back room is crowded now. You got Tyler Algier, who's a decent pass catching back. James Conner is a decent back. Trey Benson, who's, I don't know. Trey Benson's been one of those guys that everybody kind of sits on. Is like, oh, if this guy gets a chance, this guy gets a chance. And he just doesn't get those chances, and he's kind of just been floating around for the most part. I imagine you could argue that two of these dudes get moved, then James Conner and Trey Benson. We'll see. I think at some stage that may be the case, but the depth is pretty aggressive here. I mean, if Jeremiah Love were to go down and Tyler Algier were to go down, like if the top two were to go down, hurt, God forbid, James Conner and Trey Benson isn't like a horrific backfield. Like if James Conner's just, solid and himself a little bit, like it's pretty good. So you have an incredibly good and deep running back room. The problem is teams like this shouldn't have a good and deep running back room that costs so much. But again, in terms of talent on the field, it's certainly there. Tight end, Trey McBride, him and Brock Bowers, you can coin flip on who's the best tight end in the league. They're both incredibly good. He's a top 2 tight end. He's very, very good. And his production went up when Brissett was in there. And I think Brissett just finds him a little bit better and more often than Kyler does, uses him more as a safety blanket. So I expect Trey McBride to have a pretty decent year, just statistically at least. Decent blocker as well. Tip Ryman in there, solid 2. And I imagine you see a lot of 12-13 running stuff here out of Arizona. So he's going to see the field a decent amount. Elijah Higgins, Tegan Quitoriano, further down the depth chart. So again, this is probably the second or third best tight end room in the league. It's tough to get past Bowers. Like Bowers and McBride are interchangeable. I don't think Mayer and Ryman are necessarily. I like Mayer. So a top 2, 3 tight end room. It's very, very good. Again, Trey McBride is a top 2 tight end. So again, talent. So you get talent at tight end. You get talent at running back. Hopefully you can get a step out of Marvin Harrison and Michael Wilson. And then you have a decent set of weapons here. And then you have Jacoby Brissett. So hopefully this offense isn't like bottom of the league kind of horrible, but again, there's a little bit of talent here and there, so we'll see what that looks like going into the season. Offensive line now. This is a pretty interesting group. I don't think this is a horrible unit. I think it's a little bit below average, but I don't think it's like a horrible unit. There are some who have it really, really low. There are some pieces I like, particularly on the left side. But for the entire unit, again, last year, 21st in pass block win rate, 15th in run block win rate, which puts it around average. Again, run block win rate above average there. But the left side of the line is what I like. There's talent there. I think Paris Johnson at left tackle, solid. PFF's 23rd tackle last year. Has had multiple good years in a row, which we like. Again, we speak on this a lot. It's a very small sample sport. You get 17 games a year, maximum 21. That's not a lot of games to kind of assess who players are. But when you have 2 or 3 good years in a row, we're looking at 34, 51 ish games of sample, and then you really like that. So we're always wary about players, particularly in contract years, who have had 4 bad years in a row, and then in their contract year, they're like, hey, we've got to step up, get that contract, and then they dip a lot. Again, Paris Johnson, it's a couple good years in a row, which we like to see. Things he can fix, of course, probably gave up a few too many pressures and stuff, but Kyler likes to run around as well, so can look at it that way. But a solid left tackle. Sayumalu comes in from the Steelers. This is a nice addition here at left guard. PFF's 15th best guard last year, was number 4 in the league at guard in run block win rate. So that's pretty good for Jeremiah Love there, and hopefully he can bring that over to Arizona. I really like the addition of him. Froholt here at center was an average center last year. We'll see if he can kind of keep that up. He was all right. PFF's 14th best center. Again, there's only one center per team that is useful, so you're looking at about an average center last year. Hopefully he can keep that up. We'll see. Right guard, couple players have been snuck in here, but Isaiah Adams looks at the moment to be the starter there. It's lifted on top of the depth chart at least. He didn't play particularly well last year, but there were some nice things to build on. Number 6 guard in the league in run block win rate, which is really nice. But this is his 3rd year, and we hope he kind of just takes a step forward. Again, the base is nice. Again, number 6 in run block win rate is not a joke. He has just got to really step in and push that forward and build on that and hopefully turn into a much better player. Right tackle, Elijah Wilkinson, not good. This is probably going to be like a bottom. Man, there are 5 starters on every team. We're talking about 150 and then, 160 players who are going to start on offensive lines across the board. This is probably like a top or a bottom 20 guy. This is not a good player right now. The weak link in the unit. And that's kind of why we like the left side. And again, the right side's probably the problem. The left side we like. So we'll see here. Chase Basantis' depth, hopefully, or he may step in. You never know how these go. He could step in and do a job, perhaps. Matt Pryor's decent depth. Again, the rookie Basantis, hopefully he can have some useful snaps there. The rest of the guys, Udo, Fryer, Gaines, not going to get a lot out of. Jaden Williams, another deep round rookie, or a deep round rookie. We'll see what that looks like, but not in love with the depth there for the most part. So that's the offense. And again, this is a really interesting thing for me because, again, the right side of the line, we don't like. Left side, we like. So we'll see with the offensive line. If it's really, really bad on the right side, it's going to be a problem. You got Brissett at quarterback, who's a lower-end quarterback. Some nice pieces. Again, running back room we like, tight end room we like, potentially like the wide receiver room if Marvin Harrison takes a step. Mike LaFleur is going to be calling plays here, and I don't know what to do with that. He wasn't calling plays in Los Angeles, and last time he was calling plays was at the Jets during the Zach Wilson tender, and that didn't look particularly good. And you can argue whatever you want to argue there, but the play calling didn't seem particularly right. He seemed to be the guy who was scapegoated out of there, which doesn't bode well in a way. So interested to see what Mike LaFleur brings to the table. Again, it's all new, so we're going to see what this looks like. And again, we'll jump into the schedule later on, but you go to the Chargers to start, and we're going to see right off the bat there's going to be a little bit of a test for LaFleur in this offense, so we'll see what that looks like going on into it. Defense. This is definitely a bottom 2 defense. It's going to be competing with Miami most likely for the worst defense in the league. There's a ton of talent that goes out the door. Again, my 3 highest graded defenders last year in terms of just added added play was Tomlinson, Thompson, and Calais Campbell, and all three of those guys went out the door and on a pretty bad defense as it was. So not ideal, not what we want to see. His talent going out the door, but also getting a little bit older. And again, in terms of the rebuild, I don't have a problem with that. In terms of the roster this year, it is potentially problematic. So those guys are going to be a miss. But there are some okay players in this unit. Josh Sweat on the outside's all right. Nothing crazy. Solid player. He's going to start the year on the PUP. We'll see what that looks like when he gets back. Hopefully he can just be fine there. Again, he's been a pretty solid player most of his career. Again, nothing special, but we'll see. 32nd ranked edge on PFF. Who again, we mentioned PFF in these, and PFF's not a be-all, end-all, but PFF does do a pretty good set of numbers on a variety of things, and edge rushing is one thing they're pretty good at, and PFF lets us kind of have like a decent position on kind of where guys are in the league. It may not be perfect, and there may be flaws with it, but in terms of edge rushing and in terms of what we're doing here, and to kind of just set guys apart and just give you a general sense of where they are in the league, it does a pretty good number. But 32nd ranked edge on PFF, 12 sacks, 47 pressures is decent, solid, all that fun stuff. But he's going to be the guy this year, off an injury, number one, but number two, he's going to be the guy that they target this year. Offenses are going to look to nullify him and make everybody else beat you. It's going to be a pretty tough year for Josh Sweat, I think. Zaven Collins on the other side, again, fine, nothing special. 42nd ranked edge on PFF. Didn't play a ton of snaps last year, about 500, but this is kind of who he's been for 2-3 years, so I kind of expect this, and I'm not exactly sure. We're kind of past the potential portion with Zaven Collins, and I think this is just kind of who he is, which is fine. And on a good team, this is probably a solid depth piece, but starting here and getting a ton of snaps on the edge every week is probably not great for a team's overall pass rush. But again, he's okay. Nothing particularly great. Depth is not awful here. Baron Browning is solid. BJ Ojolari here. Cam Robertson, the rookie. Hopefully he can do something perhaps. Birch and Leota are okay, but BJ Ojolari and Baron Browning, you could do worse at edge depth. But it's not fantastic. This isn't exactly a great room or anything, but in terms of fall off, if the other guys aren't playing, it's not a huge drop or anything like that. Interior, not particularly great at the starter level. Walter Nolan's coming off an injury. Again, early round pick last year, first round pick. I believe he went 15th, and then had to miss most of the year hurt. So we'll see what that looks like. Again, he didn't play a ton of snaps, but he was pretty good in those snaps, to be completely fair to him. But hopefully he can kind of put the injury behind him. And this is, it's like getting I know people like to throw this around. It's like a new draft pick. It's like a new signing. It's all that. This is kind of what that is, because again, he didn't play anything last year and it's a first round pick. So hopefully he can jump into here and be solid. Roy Lopez next to him gets bought in. Okay last year, 33rd ranked interior defensive lineman. We spoke about players who have their first good year in their contract year. And obviously guys can develop at different speeds and, kind of just hit the ground running after 4 years. It takes a while to get into the NFL for some of these guys. In terms of regression, you got to worry about it here a little bit with Roy Lopez. So we'll see what that looks like. Billings, solid depth. Stills, okay depth as well. Caleb Proctor, the rookie, comes into the group. We'll see what that looks like coming in. Collier, Robinson, not guys you're really looking and hoping get a ton of snaps as the depth kind of goes down the line. So again, there could be some decent spots on the line. Again, Josh Sweat's a solid player. We'll see what Walter Nolan looks like. But overall, the talent level of that group in particular has dropped a little bit with Calais Campbell and Dalvin Tomlinson going out. So it's a new age over there. Linebacker. This isn't a good group. Period. Really. Best players Mac Wilson. He's fine last year. Below average. Nothing great. He's had a career of some decent stretches. So hopefully he can kind of become more consistent and put all that together. We'll see what that looks like. Cody Simon's going to be there next to him. PFF's 58th ranked linebacker last year. Just really didn't click as like that you would like last year in really any facet of the game. So hopefully he can take a step forward here and grow a little bit. Jack Gibbons, he's been pretty good in his snaps. The problem is there just hasn't been a ton of them year over year. So while that's all nice and dandy, again, small sample size on top of a small sample size sport is a little bit red flaggy. So we'd like to see him kind of continue that decent play. But until we see it, we're kind of up in the air about it. But again, it's a couple decent seasons, limited snaps. Decent though, so we'll see. Carson Sherrard, rookie. Maybe he'll get a couple snaps here. We'll see. Papo, another one who's been okay in his snaps. So, hopefully he can step up, maybe. We're just looking for guys who can step in and string some good performances together. But as of right now, it's a pretty crappy group, to be perfectly frank. Secondary. This is an interesting group. Will Johnson didn't have a great year last year, but I really liked him coming out of college, so maybe he can kind of just step up. The injury stuff was kind of hindered him a little bit, but he didn't play super well last year. Would like him to have a healthy year, healthy preseason, see if he can kind of hit the ground running and see if he can grow a little bit, take a couple steps in the right direction. We'll see. Denzel Burke was okay in coverage last year. First year in the league again. The run defense stuff was really bad, though. So hopefully we can make improvements there. But again, the coverage stuff was pretty good. So we'll see if he can build on that. Garrett Williams is interesting. Off a major injury. I'm not sure when he's going to be back. His timeline has been all over the place from you just reading articles, and the other day it went from like week 6 to like maybe he can play the first week of the season. He is off a torn Achilles, so we're going to wait and see to when he pops up. But when he's healthy, he's shown that he could be a good player, so maybe he can come back and elevate this unit a little bit. We'll see. Depth is kind of interesting. Starling Thomas off an injury. Sean Murphy-Bunting off an injury. There have been decent stretches of play out of both of those guys, so I wouldn't be surprised to see one kind of move into the starting lineup along the way. Got to be healthy, of course. Max Melton's solid. Keitrell Clark solid in terms of depth at this level. In terms of solid, again, I don't think a lot of these corners are very good right now. But at least if somebody were to get injured, the drop-off won't be super significant with the backups here. So I think you can see an okay room with some health and some growth. But at the moment, probably just the bottom-end group right now. Safety room, a bit of an issue. Budda Baker took a pretty significant step back last year, and while he's had a pretty good career overall, we're at that age now where like it's a worry when you fall off so aggressively. It's not as easy to get that back physically, so hopefully he can return to form, but it's something we're going to have to see first with our eyes before we can just assume it. Wingard, not great, but a vet. 69th rated safety on PFF last year. Run defense stuff is good and will continue to be good. And most vets at safety who are good at run stuff early tend to kind of keep along with that. That being said, everything else, not really that good. Taylor Demerson, similar. A little bit better in coverage and stuff. Worse in run defense. They're pretty similar in terms of some of their grading. this could be a pretty bad room. Just like if Baker doesn't step up, like step back to the level he was, you're probably looking at just like two bad safeties here, along with a like a corner group that has question marks for sure. Kitten Crawford backup, okay. Wydett Williams in there, rookie. We'll see what he looks like if he's gonna get some snaps. But overall, it's probably going to be a bad room. And again, this is probably going to be up to bottom two defense. There's some realm for growth. Again, Walter Nolan, the talents there. First round pick. Will Johnson, the talents there. Garrett Williams, the play is there if he can be healthy. There are a couple spots where, you're pretty happy with it, but there are some other spots where you're pretty worried. And again, I don't think this pass rush is very good. Potentially really bad in coverage, and that means how on earth are you going to stop teams scoring? I have no idea, to be perfectly honest with you. So this is going to be probably a pretty bad team, a bad unit, or a bad defense at least. Again, a bottom two defense right now. My guess is that's where it kind of ends. And we're going to look at the schedule now, and that you're going to see why. It probably just ends there, even with growth, and it's because there are so many difficult games on this schedule. You start at Los Angeles, then you're home to Seattle, and then at San Francisco. So two tough division games right off rip after the away game to the Chargers. Third away game in 4 as you travel to New York across the country. And then you get Detroit at home, at the Rams, Broncos at home, at Dallas, Seattle away from home as well. Rams at home, at the Chiefs. I don't know what to say, man. It's an insane schedule. You get Washington at home and Philadelphia at home before your incredibly late bye. Then you get the Jets at home. The back end's not too bad. You get the Jets at home, New Orleans on the road, Raiders at home. Those are some winnable games down the stretch. And then San Francisco at home. 3 of your last 4 at home. Actually, 5 of your last 6 are at home, which is pretty weird. But yeah, this schedule is truly nasty. I don't know what to do with it, man. It's not good. It's problematic. You're going to be double digit dogs a lot. You're going to be I can't even imagine where your first game is favorite in. Like if Jaden Daniels is not playing for Washington, maybe there. You're going to be a dog everywhere else. And then you have the Jets at home, which you're probably favored in, and the Raiders at home, which you're favored in. You're probably favored in, 2 games, maybe, along the way. It's a problem. It is a problem. So not only is this team probably going to be bad, even if this team was solid, like even if against an average schedule, this was like an 8-win team, against that schedule, man, that is horrible. Like even if you put like an average team there, like say we put the Steelers on this schedule. What's the Steelers over under here, man? It's tough. It's a really tough schedule. So it's on top of the team not being very good, the schedule is truly bad. But it's a complete and utter rebuild year. It's a bridge year. It's a get all the dead weight out of the locker room year. Hopefully the younger guys can take a step in the right direction year. We'll draft our quarterback of the future next draft. It's one of them. And, it's painful, but you kind of have to go through it. We do have one bet for Arizona, and it is Marvin Harrison. Marvin Harrison over 825.5 receiving yards at plus 110. A $16.39 bet for us in our challenge. I believe in the bounce back, man. I know he's got his issues. We're talking 49 or less, just under 49 yards per game here. I think he's more than capable of that. And again, there are issues. The drop stuff is genuine. That being said, I think he's getting open a lot more than probably he was found a little bit last year. And I think he can handle and he can have some of these really big games. And even with Kyler, he was having some big games, but down the stretch, while he kind of faded out as the year went out, there were some games there with Jacoby Brissett where he got a bunch, man. He got 10 targets here, um, 10 targets against Dallas, 12 against Seattle. And they're going to be behind a lot, throwing a lot. Um, so I expect, a couple of big games again. He only went for 608 last year. But I think the ceiling is there. Again, there are some games here you really like. 66 yards, 98 yards, 71, 96. Again, some of the target games, he had double-digit targets in multiple games. That, again, the last two games, he goes for 14 total yards, and there's like 4 total targets here. But they were kind of all just fading away as a team and just waiting for the year to be over for the most part. And Trey McBride's going to get most of the targets, completely get that. But to the outside, I think Marvin Harrison ends up with the most targets, so I'm willing to take some plus money on his over there. And again, I think he has some high ceiling games. I really do still think the talent's there. I think the ability to separate on some of the crappier corners is still there. Again, Dallas, he had 10 targets. That's what you're looking for there. For whatever reason, in the 2 Seattle games, he had 22 targets combined, which is interesting. But some of these teams with like worse off secondaries, I can see him beating coverage relatively comfortably. So I like it. And again, I know it's a very difficult schedule as we've seen, but there are some secondaries who can be beat here, I think. San Francisco, you play twice. Giants, you can beat in the secondary. Detroit, you can beat in the secondary, I think. Dallas, you can beat in the secondary, I think. Washington, you can beat in the secondary. The Jets, the Raiders, these are all teams I think you can beat in the secondary, and he's capable of having some big games there. And again, we're talking 50 yards a game, 49 yards a game, and again, it's 230 yards more than he had last year, but this is the year, man. And I know the Cardinals are going to want to get him touches. I know the Cardinals are going to want to see if what they have with Marvin Harrison. I wouldn't rule out force feeding him also all year long just to kind of see what they have. This is a what do you have type of year for Arizona, and I think Marvin Harrison benefits from that. So there we are with the Arizona Cardinals. A lot going on here, a big rebuild coming, some really tough circumstances going into the year, but hopefully they're at least competitive for long stretches, and we get some good looks at some of the younger players. Again, maybe we get a step from Marvin Harrison. We get some steps from the rookies in there, and they kind of hit the ground running. And you kind of build on there, end up with your QB of the future next year, and you're in a pretty decent spot going into it. So there you are, Arizona Cardinals.